Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode, we added pickable ammo to the game. In this episode, we're going to add the aim down sights functionality, or in short, ADS. Up until now, we were only hip firing, but like in most FPS games, we also want to have the option to shoot and aim using the actual weapon sight. So first of all, we're going to create the animation for the ADS, and then we will also add the logic to make it work. Another thing that we're going to do is change the spread intensity accordingly. So if we use hipfire, the weapon will be less accurate, and if we use ADS, it will become more accurate, just like in most games. Now, because each weapon model is different, it has a different size and a different position, we also need to create a unique ADS animation for each model. So I'm going to show you how to do it with a pistol, and then you're going to be able to do it with the rest of your weapons. So first of all, we open our prefabs and we drag our pistol into the weapon slot. Now we can't see it on the player and over here, so we need to click on the animation tab and we click on preview. And now we see it inside the player and on our screen. So this is the hip fire position. This is the position that we were using up until now, but we want to move the pistol to be in an ADS position. So we want to align the weapon sights to this middle dot. We want to position it closer to the camera. So we need to create an animation for this. So all you do is create a new clip. You position the marker at the 0 frame and you start recording, and then you simply move the pistol until it reaches this exact position. Of course, it's going to take you a while. You can make it a bit closer. You need to fine-tune it and move it over here until you find the exact position. And then you're going to stop recording, and it should be only on the first frame. You don't need to bother with the other frames because we simply want to bring the pistol to this position. Later, we're also going to add some kind of idle sway, so we're going to use the rest of the frames. For now, simply record it on the 0 frame. Now, I already did this. I already find the exact position. So let's just go back. And if we go over here, I already created this pistol ADS idle animation. And if I click on preview, we can see that the pistol is in the center and it's aligned with this little dot. And it's recorded on the 0 frame. And another thing that I want to mention is that when you move the pistol around, it will change the position of the pistol, but it will not record the rotation. So even if you don't rotate the weapon, you still want to make sure that the rotation is recorded on this animation. Otherwise, it's going to be weird. So just make sure that the rotation and the position are both recorded in this ADS animation. The next thing that we want to do now that we have this ADS idle animation is to connect it inside the animator. So we want to actually activate it. So now while the pistol is selected, we're going to open our animator tab, and over here we can see this new pistol ADS idle animation. And now we want to connect the rest of the animations to this animation. And we're not going to create a transition from the idle, because what if we trigger this ADS while we have a recoil? We don't want to create two transitions. So we're going to create a transition from any state. And it means that it can be triggered at any time. So we're simply going to make a transition over here, and then we're going to have a transition to go back to the idle state. So we can activate the ADS from any state, but when the ADS is over, then it's going to go back into this idle hipfire state. Now we also want to create a parameter that is going to trigger this ADS. So we're going to have a boolean, and we're going to name it is ADS. Then we're going to press on this transition, and over here, we're going to add a condition that will be this is ADS, and it will be set to true. Another thing we want to do is change the transition duration to be 0.1, because we want the switch to this animation to be a bit more snappy. So you can mess around with it, but I found that 0.1 is a good value. Then we also want to disable this fixed duration. Then we will also click on this out transition, and then we're going to disable the exit time. We're going to change it to 0.1. We're going to disable the fixed duration. And over here, we're going to have a condition that will be is ADS, but this time it will be false. And now in order to actually activate the ADS mode, we need to trigger this is ADS boolean, and we're going to do it inside our weapon script. So inside the weapon script, we're going to reach this update method, and inside this if statement, so only if the weapon is active, we're going to create another if statement. So now each time we're going to press on the mouse button 1, which is the right mouse button. When we hold this button, it's going to move us into the ADS mode. And if we release the button, it's going to set it to be false. So we're going to go back to the hipfire mode. Now, this is not the proper way to do it, and we're going to change it, but this is just so you see how it works initially. And of course, it's not a good idea to always run it inside the update method, because it will simply trigger this animation each frame. And that's not something efficient. We only want to trigger it once and then trigger it back to be idle. We don't want to keep triggering it every frame. Now, before we test this out, we also want to add some kind of sway to our idle ADS animation. So we click on our pistol, we go to our animation tab, we go to the pistol ADS idle animation, we click on preview. You're only going to have this first frame, but I already added these frames, so it's the same animation from before, but right now we're simply going to add a few more keyframes. So you're going to select the 30th frame, you're going to start recording, and you're going to move your pistol down a bit on the y-axis. So you can see that over here it's 315, but over here it's 312. So we really move it just a bit down, and then we can copy all of this and paste it at the 60th frame, and it will simply go back to its original position. So it goes down a bit and then it goes up a bit. So now when we start the game and we pick up a pistol, it will of course appear in the default hipfire position, but now I'm going to press and hold the right mouse button, so it's going to snap to the ADS position, and it simply runs this animation. And then when I release the button, it goes back to the hipfire position. Now, you can see that we don't have this idle sway, although we did create it. And the reason is because we have this problem with the update method. It simply keeps running this animation over and over, so it never actually has a chance to do this idle sway. So we're going to fix it right now. So to fix this problem, we are going to click on the animator, and over here we're going to add two more triggers. So the first one will be enter ADS, and the other one will be exit ADS. And now we're going to change the conditions. So the transition that goes into the ADS, we're going to change it to be enter ADS. And then the transition that goes back to the hipfire, we're going to change to be exit ADS. And inside the weapon script, we're going to do a few changes. So over here, we're going to have two different if statements. The first one is going to be get mouse button down. So as long as we hold the mouse button down, and then we're also going to have get mouse button up. So when we release the mouse button. And now if we pick up a pistol and we go into ADS, we can see that the pistol is idly swaying. Now it seems a bit too much, it's too fast, so we can also make it a bit slower. So we can go over here and then change the speed to be about 0.2. And now we can see that it looks much better. Now, because we changed the speed of this animation, then when we go back into Hipfire, you can see that it's much slower. And if it's fine by you, then just leave it like that. But for me, it's a bit too slow and I want it to be a bit snappier. So all I need to do is go over here and then change this to be even smaller. So 0.05. So now when we release the ADS, it goes back to the Hipfire much faster. And of course, you can play around with it. Now we have another problem, and the problem is that when we are inside the ADS mode and we shoot, then we go back to the Hipfire mode, it plays this recoil animation. And the reason for that is when we shoot, it automatically runs our recoil parameter. So it waits for us to go back into the Hipfire mode and then it plays the recoil animation. So of course we don't want this. Later we're also going to create a recoil animation for the ADS, but for now we don't want this to happen, right? So let's fix this. Inside the weapon script, we're going to add another boolean over here, and we're going to name it isAds. Then inside the update, we're going to set it to be true over here. So isAds true, and over here isAds false. So now we can know when we're actually in ADS and when we are not in ADS. Then we go to our fire weapon method. So this is the method that is called when we actually shoot the pistol. And we have this animation over here. So this is the animation for the Hipfire mode. So we don't want to call it each time we shoot the weapon. We want to have an animation for the ADS recoil, and we want to have an animation for the Hipfire recoil. So we're going to have an if statement. So if we are in ADS, then we're going to run the ADS recoil animation that we're going to have later. Recoil ADS. If we're not in ADS, then we're going to run this animation. So now when we shoot and we go back, we have no recoil animation. So it works the way we want it to. Next, we want to create the recoil animation for the ADS mode. So again, we're going to find our pistol, drag it into the weapon slot, and then we're going to move to the animation tab. We're going to activate the preview so we can see the pistol. And instead of moving the pistol back into this position, it doesn't make any sense. You can simply go to your idle ADS animation, activate the preview, and then copy the first keyframes so you will already have this position. So I'm simply going to press on Ctrl C, and then I'm going to create a new animation and name it Pistol ADS Recoil, and I'm going to paste it over here. So I already have this created. So I'm simply going to paste these first keyframes on the 0 frame. So it's going to look like that. But then we also want to create the actual recoil. Now, because the recoil animation should be very fast, we're not going to use the entire 60 frames. We're only going to use 10 frames. So at the 5th frame, we are going to move the pistol back a bit. So you can see over here, we are in this position, but then when we move to the 5th frame, it goes back a bit on the Z axis. So these are not exact values. For you, it's going to be a bit different, but simply move it a bit backwards so it gets this kick animation, and then move it back to the original position. You can simply copy this and paste it over here. So then we have this very fast kick. Then after the animation is created, we go into our animator and we can find the new animation over here. So now we need to connect it as well. So we're going to connect it to this pistol ADS idle, and we're going to have one transition to this recoil and then one transition back. And we're going to create a new trigger, and we're going to name it recoil ADS. So now over here, this will be the condition, recoil ADS, and we're going to disable the exit time, we're going to disable the fixed duration, and we're going to set this at 0. And you don't need to add anything to the other transition. So when we go back into the idle, because it will simply run this recoil once and then it will go back automatically to the idle. So you don't need to set any kind of condition over here. And you can leave these things as they are because it will automatically go back. And now inside the script, we're simply going to run this trigger over here. So recoil ADS. And again, like I explained in other episodes, make sure that the values that you have over here are going to be the same exact names that you have for the different weapons. Because if you're going to create an animation for your M16 and you're going to name this something else, then it's not going to work with your weapon script. So make sure that they always get the same names. Another thing that we need to do is set the recoil animation to only play once and not actually loop. So for this, we go into our animations. I have them over here. I don't know why. I'm going to copy them into my animations folder. So I have this pistol ADS recoil, and I disable the loop time because you are going to have it set to loop time. Simply disable it. And if you have other weapons with recoils, you should know that recoils should not loop. So all your recoil animations, you should disable the loop time because we only want the recoil to happen once. And now when we run the game and we ADS and we shoot, we have this recoil. And I don't have any bullets, so I'm going to pick up these little boxes that I created with the ammo from the previous episode. Now you can see that we have this little middle dot, and we should not see it when we're inside the ADS because that's the point of the ADS. We want to use the actual weapon model to aim and not this little dot. So we're going to get rid of it. Inside the HUD manager, we're going to create a reference for this middle dot. So public game object middle dot. So we have the middle dot and we're going to drag it into the HUD manager. And then inside the weapon script, we're going to make it visible and invisible each time we're inside ADS or when we exit ADS. So over here, so now we're basically done with the ADS animation for our weapon. Now you need to do it for the rest of your weapons, for the different models. You need to have a recoil animation while in ADS, an idle animation while in ADS, or you can just keep it simple. You can just have the ADS without any swaying, without any recoil. It really depends on the style of your game. Now, as I told you, we also want to change the spread intensity depending on if we're inside ADS or if we're not. So over here at the top, we're going to have two more variables. So we have our spread intensity. So we're going to also add a public float, hip spread intensity, and ADS spread intensity. So both of these will simply hold the different values for the hip spread and the ADS spread. We can also add a header so everything will be organized because we are starting to have a lot of different variables over here. So now inside the inspector, inside the weapon script, we can find our spread variables. So this is the spread that we had so far, and we set it right over here, but we no longer want to set it to be this spread intensity. We want to set it according to the different mode. So we're going to simply make it 0, and later it's not going to be even visible because we're going to make it private. So you need to find the exact values for the hip and for the ADS. So the hip fire should be less accurate. And for this, we're going to set something like 0.4. So the higher the value, the more spread, right? The intensity will be higher, so the weapon is basically less precise. But when we're inside the ADS mode, we want the weapon to be more precise. So we're going to set a smaller value at 0.04. Now this is just an example. You can play around with it. You can have different values for different weapons. But this is something that I tested out, and you're going to see how it looks like. Now inside the weapon script, inside the awake method, we want to set the spread intensity to be equals to our hip spread intensity, because this is the first thing that is actually activated when we start the game. Only later we're going to click on the mouse and go into ADS, but at the beginning it's going to get this value. And then when we actually go into ADS, we're going to set the spread intensity to be the ADS spread intensity. And when we go back to the hip fire, we're going to set the spread intensity to be the hip spread intensity. So this is like some kind of slot that is going to hold the spread intensity, and we're simply going to populate it with the different values depending on if we're inside ADS or not inside ADS. We also see that we got a lot of things going on over here, so we can create methods for both of these. So we can have a public, private void enter ADS and private void exit ADS. And then we're simply going to copy this over here, copy this over here, and then call both of these methods, so things will be much clearer and much more readable. Now, before we test this out and end this episode, there is some kind of bug that I did not notice for many episodes. So if we go down over here, inside this method that checks the direction of the bullet and sets the spread intensity, these values are not the correct ones. Because if you noticed, when we are going to shoot, it's going to only go up or down depending on the spread. But in reality, we want it to also go horizontally, not only vertically. So this is not correct. And I think I just missed it. So instead of the X value, we're going to change it to be Z. And then we're going to change the X to be 0. And then we're going to set the Z over here. So now the spread will go horizontally and vertically. Now there is something else that I messed up with. And over here inside these methods, it's actually supposed to be false when we go into ADS and true when we exit ADS, okay? Now back over here, because we did a few changes in the actual prefab, we set these values, we do want to save this prefab. So we go over here and we apply all. And now that everything is saved, we can delete it from the weapon slot and we can run the game. If I pick up the weapon and I pick up some ammo, if I'm going to shoot in hipfire mode, you're going to see this big spread, so the weapon is not precise. But if I go into ADS, we can also see the middle dot disappear. So if I go into ADS and I shoot, it will be much more precise. and everything is working as it should. So that's all for this episode. Now you need to go and add these ADS animations to the rest of your weapons. I'm also going to do it to the M16, and later we're going to add a few more models and do it to them. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. Please leave a like. It will also help me a lot. And see you next time.